How can I have a career I really enjoy? What does it take, and how can I get there?
I wish I had known earlier that the career wasn't the goal. Having the life I wanted was the goal. And it didn't mean that I wasn't ambitious. It didn't mean that I didn't set goals and achieve them professionally. It really was about how do I make my life work and what matters to me.
Here is an episode that I think speaks to what is on most people's mind when they listen to a show like mine. How can I have a career I really enjoy? What does it take, and how can I get there? Hi, it's Dr. Mira Brancu, and welcome to The Hard Skills. Our guest today is Dr. Sharon Hull. Dr. Hull is a veteran executive coach with over 35 years in healthcare leadership, including holding multiple professor and department chair roles, as well as a past director of executive coaching. And now she is a founder and CEO of a thriving coaching and consulting firm. Her career journey has come with a high level of personal career satisfaction herself, and we want to learn from her and what it took and what she's learned from her clients. She is the author of Professional Careers by Design, a handbook for the Bespoke Life. I have this book. I love this book. I use this book. I refer other people to this book all the time. She loves to work with people who want to craft a career that works for their own life, their values, and the needs of their key stakeholders. And she and I are also partnering on an upcoming workshop in April on managing career decisions and transitions. So if you like the information you learned today, check out the show notes to hear more about that workshop, as well as other resources she has to share. So let's get started. Sharon, tell us about the 35 to 40-year professional career and how it ended up leading to lots of career satisfaction. How did you create it? What did you experience?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I'm delighted to talk to you and your audience. It's a little daunting to hear you say 35 or 40 years of a career because I forget that it's been that long and I don't feel that old, but here we are. And I don't think I act that old, so maybe that's true. I think for me, I have a first profession and a second profession is how I look at my career. And along the way, I had several jobs and several roles. And how I did it, at the beginning of this journey, I think I set out like the flight of the Bumblebee, and I didn't really know where I was going. And I kind of went to where opportunities presented themselves and interested me. And after I'd done that enough times that my spouse said, "Are you ever going to hold a job?" And I said, "But I keep getting promoted." I realized that there was a disconnect between how some people saw my career and how I saw it, and that what I was really doing internally was being very intentional, but it wasn't obvious to those around me, and it wasn't even obvious to me how I was being intentional. So I started becoming a student of my own intentionality, is what I would say. And I realized that there were times that something interested me, but not enough to go after it. And there are times when something really interested me and it could have diverted me from my whole path, and I might have had career ADHD, to not misuse a diagnosis that is very real and important. But to say, how are you making these decisions? And I think there was a point in my career where an organization asked me if I would do some career consultations with people, because I seemed to have done a lot of career transition and I seemed to be making it work. And I thought, I don't think I'm an expert in this, but I have experience. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I became a student of my own intentions, is what I would say.
Yeah. And is there anything that you, after starting to work with people and translate what you did for yourself to help them, is there anything that you sort of wished that you had known sooner?
I think there are some things I wish I'd known sooner, but I'm not sure it's possible to know them when you're young and in the throes, particularly of a professional career. And I can talk more about that if you want me to. But one of those things is that your career should serve your life. And what I mean by that, we can talk in some depth about, but I wish I had known earlier that the career wasn't the goal. having the life I wanted was the goal. I think
Yeah.
we all have to kind of learn that the hard way. It doesn't come in our 20s or 30s usually, because we're so focused on getting whatever it takes to make that first career happen. And this is not the way, at least in Western cultures, people look at work. So it's a contrarian approach to work. And I didn't realize that I was developing this contrarian approach to work. By mid-career, I sort of figured out that I needed my job to serve my life and not the other way around. And it didn't mean that I wasn't ambitious, and it didn't mean that I didn't set goals and achieve them professionally, but it really was about how do I make my life work and what matters to me. So,
And I wonder, you and I both work with high achievers in sort of highly technical roles, often who moved into leadership. They are ambitious, they are go-getters, they work incredibly hard to reach higher and higher levels constantly. And I'm wondering, how do you help them think about the tension between the external societal pressures around achievement and productivity, when your career is prioritized over life, and then how to try to rebalance your career serving your life, as you say?
it's a really good set of questions, and I'll try to frame my answer relative to what I see as the stages of a career. I hope that's okay with you if I go there.
Yeah.
You know that
Yeah.
work a little bit.
Yes.
I think we have seasons in our lives where one part of the if you think work-life balance as a teeter-totter, and it's almost never at perfect alignment or perfect balance. If it is, we can't sustain that very long. And sometimes there is a predominance of attention on our career. Sometimes it's got to be about the rest of our life, right? And sometimes one or the other of those is like the bully on the playground teeter-totter, where you're stuck up here at the top and the bully's just taking everything you've got and doesn't feel like you can shift that. That analogy is one of the reasons I don't like the idea of work-life balance. I think more about work-life alignment with what matters and what season we're in. So in early career, I think many times it's not so much that it's a bully on a playground, but it's that career takes precedence. And particularly this is true for women, if you have young children, it's a real tension. And to recognize that is normal and it is a tension and it is okay to try to reach alignment or balance as much as you can. On any given day, you'll be this far off or this far off, but you don't want to be like this. And I don't know if you can see my hands in the video. And
Yes.
I talk with my
Yes.
hands sometimes, but hopefully that makes
And for
sense
those
to
of you who listen later, who are not watching the video but listen later, one of her hands is all the way up here, of course, on near her forehead, and the other is all the way down near her shoulder.
Yes. Thank you for helping the people who are not watching the visual here. I think an example of when one part of the teeter-totter is out of balance with the other is often if there are young children. That can be true for men. It's not just true for women, right? I think there is a period of time, and I work with a lot of academic people, and if they're in early career trying to go for tenure, that is almost like a bully on a playground. It's all you can think about, and you've really got to work hard to bring in the personal life balance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Another example where it gets out of alignment is if you are faced with serious caregiving issues. Could be childcare, but it could also be taking care of a loved one who's ill or having a personal illness yourself. And that's a season in people's lives where the personal life takes precedence and is that part of the teeter-totter is predominant. So hope I haven't taken the teeter-totter analogy too far. I think at different seasons, different parts of the teeter-totter are in play, and we do our best. The learning for me from my clients is that it takes courage to say, this is out of balance, and it must get better if I'm to be productive. I think that's not the thing that Go ahead. I want you to jump in here.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And I was just going to add, and self-awareness, that it feels that the tension they're experiencing is around some kind of misalignment that needs to welcome some kind of change in order for you to relieve that tension that you're experiencing.
Yes. To normalize that tension rises and falls throughout our life, throughout our career cycles. That's normal. It's not been normal in Western culture to talk about it until the last decade or two. And this is a place where I'm a young boomer. I just own that. But the millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, the people who are behind them, they get this in a way that we boomers didn't. And it wasn't okay for us to talk about it. And I've learned so much from my clients in those generations behind me to say it really is okay to talk about this is intention. And if I'm to be productive in the workplace, I have to manage the tension productively to be productive.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that this brings up for me is there's the tension point where we're talking about like recognizing it, being self-aware to recognize it, and then having the courage to take next steps to find, kind of like a new way of doing things if that tension is creating too much disruption or problems or whatever. What I'm wondering about is I have people in my leadership academy who, I was talking about the upcoming workshop between us, and one of them, said, well, I'm actually really happy with where I am. Would this kind of workshop still be useful to me? And I, said, absolutely, because it's better to know what to look for in advance instead of waiting for the tension point and then, scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. So that makes me think about maybe like talking about some of your frameworks for how to think about career cycles, how to think about decision making, to have those tools in your toolbox well before you get to the point where you're stuck or trapped or overwhelmed or frustrated and that kind of thing. So let's move into the career transition cycle just to start with one framework that you have.
Okay. Happy to do that.
Let me share it.
Okay.
Okay. And you can talk us through it.
Okay. So I think this speaks to the person who asked you, I'm pretty happy right now. What do I need to think about? How would this be valuable to me? And you also asked if there's anything I wish I had learned earlier. I wish I had understood that we go through cycles in our career and that's normal. Might not have been normal for the older boomers who expected to work 40 years and get a gold watch, but those days are probably gone. And most of us will change careers a couple of times, sometimes as much as 3 or 4 over a lifetime. And almost all of us will change jobs multiple times. So this is my description of the process that we go through. We take a new role and we're kind of up about 1 o'clock on the circle here in this graphic, and we're happy to be there. We're satisfied. It's a great new job. We're excited. And even if we've been there a while, we may remain very satisfied. Eventually, something will happen. It might be something really good, like somebody gives you your dream job offer someplace else, and you really have to look at it even though you weren't unhappy. Or something bad happens. You get downsized, or you have a toxic boss, or maybe it's kind of in the middle. Your spouse gets a job offer that they need to take and you need to move. So something happens and we begin to think, I need to make a move for whatever reason. We enter a phase that I call search targeting. I'm thinking about looking for a new role, job, position, or career. And I got to figure out what I'm looking for. What's the target, right? And part of that is what's the job I want or what's the profession I want. And part of it is who has that kind of job in the geographic region I might be looking at. So that's what I call targeting. Once you throw your hat in the ring in a search, you're in what I call the search to offer phase. You're sending in your materials, you're going through the interviews, you're in the throes of a search. And sometimes you're in the throes of more than one at once, which gets a little chaotic, but if you know this is the cycle, you can plan for it. Once you have an offer, you enter the negotiation phase. And that has its own set of tasks and challenges and outcomes that you're looking for. Once you successfully negotiate a job offer, you're then onboarding to the new job and offboarding the old job, usually at the same time, which can be crazy making. And there are ways through that because you want to set yourself up for success and land back at the top of this circle and be satisfied and happy to be where you are. So that's how I look at this cycle. Most of us are going to go through this cycle multiple times. I think for boomers, we go through it 2, 3, 4 times. I think for Gen Z and earlier people, they're going to go through it anytime misalignment happens and they become aware of it. They're very keyed to misalignment between their values and their expectations at work, between their personal needs and their professional needs. And when things are misaligned, our younger colleagues are willing to enter this cycle and they want the tools to do it. And that's why, even if you're not looking right now, understanding that there's a cycle and having some tools for each of those stages can be really helpful. That was a long answer.
Absolutely. No, that was great. Thank you for walking us through the cycle. And I would say when it's these sort of like something good happens, part of it that could trigger you going through the cycle, it could be that there's an opportunity you were not expecting at this stage or time in your life, and all of a sudden it's there right in front of you. You hadn't been thinking about it, you hadn't been planning for it, you haven't been working towards it, but there it is. And it's useful to have the experience to go through the cycle, even if you hadn't considered it, right? Even the process of searching, getting an offer helps clarify what's important to me right now and what is not. Because ultimately, if you still turn it down, you now have way more information than you had before about yourself and what's important to you and what's important to your stakeholders, your family members or your friends, or, whoever has a stake in the success or outcome of your choices, your decisions. And I have personally found that I will pursue these kind of opportunities routinely just to get more clarity about what's important to me, right? And sometimes I'll pursue them because I didn't realize it was as important as it ended up being. And sometimes I'll realize, wow, I thought that was important and it's actually not. And that was really helpful to go through.
Yes. Oh, you get what I am talking about. And I know we've talked about this many times offline, but when you asked what I wish I had known earlier, part of this business of my career should serve my life. And there's a way to think about how to respond in the moment. And if I have the tools and I've been intentional about them, then I'm not off guard when something really good comes up, when something middle of the road but needs to be looked at comes up, or when something that's a crisis happens. And I wonder if you'll indulge an analogy that I don't think you've heard me use before. Some of your listeners perhaps live in places prone to wildfires. And there is a way, if you live in a place like that you prepare your home before the fire comes. You clear the brush away, you keep things clear, you think about building materials, you think about where the water is. You have a plan for when the fire comes. And if you do that planning, if the fire comes, you can ride it out. You can survive it. You can perhaps survive it unscathed, not always. But I think of this, the way that I think about careers is that you keep yourself prepared for the fire, whether it's a hot fire that can destroy, like a negative crisis, or whether it's a kind of fire of excitement in your belly for this thing you didn't even know you were interested in. If you have done some work along the way and recognize that these things come, you can respond really creatively to them, even the toughest of those changes, right? So I don't know if that analogy rings true to you. I hope maybe it's helpful.
It is. And although I personally, we, don't live in an area like that, we do live in an area, Sharon and I live in an area where there are always risks for hurricanes and tornadoes sometimes. And so I've got all kinds of backup plans, plan B, C, D, not just for that, of course, but for many, many other things. And, sometimes my family laughs at me, but I'm like, just you wait, this plan, even if I never use the things I put in place, I feel a lot more confident and empowered and ready to face things because I've been thinking about it. I've been squirreling away things, things like that. So definitely. Let's add one more framework for folks. And I want, those of you who are listening, it doesn't matter where you are in your career. So you could be thinking about this as early career just starting out, and you could be thinking about this in your, capstone final, piece of work and moving beyond that into retirement or into kind of the next chapter after like full-time roles, right? So we're thinking a lifetime of career satisfaction here. And Sharon, you have 5 strategies to offer folks when, how to think about creating that lifetime of career satisfaction. What are those 5 strategies?
So I think you are right. I love that you have a plan A, B, C, D, and E for anything that happens around you. And that's kind of what I think that these strategies will give you. The first is to really understand that you are the CEO of your own life and career. And you can act like a CEO no matter how young or old you are. And I don't want to make this about age, but whatever stage of career you're in, early, middle, or senior career, you're in charge. Nobody tells you that. You have to sort of claim that for yourself. And again, our
Mm-hmm.
younger colleagues are really good at this. And some of the boomers get really mad because they're really in charge of their own lives. But it's actually healthy, I think. So that's the first strategy. Be the CEO of your own life. The second thing is foundational in the way that I approach my own career decisions. And you know something about that with me. But it's also foundational in how I've helped my clients do this. Stay connected to the things that matter most to you. One of my favorite questions is, what matters most to you? Make a top 10 list and update that list regularly. Whenever you have any change in your life circumstances, and every year on your birthday or whatever holiday is meaningful to you, update it regularly and anytime circumstances change. So that's strategy 2. Keep your top 10 list up to date. Strategy 3 is to cultivate friends and mentors and colleagues who really are connected to this idea that you're the CEO of your life and the things that matter to you matter. If you surround yourself with friends who don't believe that way, you're going to find it a lot harder to get support for the kinds of decisions you might want to make. But if you have friends, mentors, colleagues who do this actively, they can help you see ways to move toward alignment. And that really is the goal. What's the alignment with that top 10 list? How much of what you want and what matters to you are you getting? And what can you do to get more of it? So that's number 3.
Yeah.
Keep your friends.
Let's stop
Keep your
there.
friends close.
Let's stop there before we get to 4 and 5. Just a couple of thoughts to expand on these. There are, when you're earlier in your career, this idea of you are the CEO of your own life career can be hard to sort of incorporate because we are so reliant on our supervisors or managers to support us to get to the next thing. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that you also have to make your own choices about these. Does that make sense for me? Right?
Mhm.
And that goes into number 2. They're very closely tied together. When your supervisor or manager wants to position you for this next step, asking yourself, is that the right step for me? Am I curious about it? Am I open to it? Or am I resistant to it? And what is that about? There's a lot of sort of like checking in with yourself about these kind of things if you're going to be the CEO of your life or career, right? And if you've got a lot of friends or mentors or folks around you that are saying, that's a crazy decision, that's a terrible decision, that's I don't know why you would do that, sort of like questioning every step instead of leaning in with curiosity and supporting some of your thinking and trying to help you clarify, those might be some signs that you don't have enough support around how to think about these things and how to have the support you need to make scary decisions, right? Because some of the questions that you get are more about the other person's nervousness than about your needs, right? So just a couple of things to be thinking about when it comes to those first 3. Let's go into
Could I
number 4.
amplify?
Yeah,
Before we
absolutely.
do that, could I amplify? I think it's really important for early career folks to recognize that this is not as easy early on. And sometimes the way that you do this is to start by just making that list of what matters and testing the opportunities that come your way against that list. have a trusted friend who's outside of work, who's not your supervisor and not a peer who might be under the same kind of pressures you are, but somebody who's outside of that milieu that you can say, look, I'm trying this habit from this wild woman I heard on this podcast about just making this list of what matters most to me. And I want to test the hypothesis that my supervisor wants to put me forward for this. Is this aligned for me? And early in your career, you sometimes have to take those conversations outside the workplace to find support for them, because you do make people really nervous. If you're thinking differently, remember, this is a contrarian approach to work, and it can scare the people around you. Your peers will go, wait, but that's not how I'm thinking about it. I really have to go all out on the ambition, and I can't think that way. Don't talk to me. It scares me. Okay, let them not go there with you. Find somebody outside of work who can support you. So thanks for letting me throw that in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I did this, and I'm somebody who is very introspective. And I did this, like top 10 things that matter most to me. And I was surprised at what I wrote down. So you might just surprise yourself. It's a good exercise.
It is helpful.
All right. Let's move to number 4.
Great. I think number 4 gets easier to do if you start practicing making that list. This strategy is to really look for creative ways to meet the needs on that list, that top 10 list. Thinking outside the box and getting creative, some of us are prone to that anyway. But many of us are not, particularly in early or mid-career in a profession where there is a lot of pressure to conform. But if you keep that touchstone of your top 10 list of what matters, you can go, how would I get more of this? And I'll give you an example. I always ask people, what surprised you about your list? I don't ask people to tell me what's on their list unless they care to, but what surprised you about the list? The thing that surprises many people is that there are 5 or 6 items down that list before anything about their work, their career, their profession makes it to the list, right? So they're surprised about that. And that means often that family or personal health and well-being or spending time with friends is nearer the top than they thought it would be. And so people come to me, particularly in mid-career, and think, look, I don't have time for friends. I don't have time to exercise. I've focused everything to get where I am professionally, and that's not working anymore. I ask them then to say, well, if you could craft your ideal situation, work and home, how would you craft it to get as much of those things on your top 10 list as possible? And that's where the creative thinking outside the box comes in. So that's really strategy 4. Think outside the box and don't be afraid to get creative. If you're somebody who processes externally and talks through ideas, again, don't talk through these ideas at work where your supervisor might get wind of it and go, what the heck are you thinking? Or where your peers might not be as supportive because they're not thinking in a contrarian fashion. Find those trusted people in your circle outside of work and say, how could I get creative about this? So that's number 4. Are you okay if I go to number 5, or do you want to wait?
Let me add just a couple of additional examples of how to get creative. A lot of people don't realize that everything's negotiable. You can negotiate almost anything. You don't have to accept it's either this, or I either accept this opportunity or I have to turn it down. That doesn't have to be the case. The creativity is the in-between. Right? So saying, I love this, and this about this opportunity, but I really feel like this one piece doesn't fit. Is there anything we can do with that one piece? And then all of a sudden you've created and designed as a CEO of your life that opportunity, right? And if they say, no, that's okay, but you've tried, right? So that's one example. Other examples can be, volunteer opportunities are probably the most underrated way to get more experience, skills, access to other opportunities that you haven't had access to before, and explore and play around without the risk. So those are just a few examples. Find your most creative mentors, friends, coaches, and engage them in exploring this aspect for yourself?
I so want to double click in on that because it's right. And a couple of other ways to do it, just to be brief, if you're part of the Leadership Academy that Mira is hosting, talk to your peers in there. It's a laboratory for exploring this kind of stuff. The second is find somebody that looks like they've been really creative about how they put something together and ask for 30 minutes of their time. People will almost always give it to you, particularly if you say, I'm really fascinated by what you've done with your career. Would you be willing to spend 30 minutes telling me your story? People will always agree to tell you their story. So do that kind of interview with people that think that you think have been really creative. So good.
Great. Okay. And last but not least, the fifth strategy.
You alluded to it. I'm going to say the single best thing you can do for your career satisfaction, starting as early as you possibly can, find a way to learn great negotiating skills.
Aha.
Whether you take a course, whether you read a book, and there are some great books out there on negotiating. If you can understand that negotiating is almost never either or, but both and or pieces and parts of what you want and what the other person wants, all of a sudden you get some strategies, not just to negotiate for money or job title, but to negotiate for those creative opportunities. This really does amplify what Mira was saying about it's almost never either or. And if you take a negotiating course, watch one online, read every book you can find about negotiating. And a couple of my favorites are Getting to Yes by William Ury and colleagues, and Ask and Women Don't Ask by Sarah Lashover and colleagues. Those are two excellent books. There's another one called Never Split the Difference, and I'm going to have to say I can't remember the author's name, but those are three of my go-to books about negotiation.
Excellent. 100% agree. Yes, we are on the same page about this. So let's take some examples of how different folks at different stages in their career can apply these 5 strategies. Thinking about, let's start with early career. What are some ways that they can start stretching into new opportunities? And when should they be thinking about those kinds of things?
If I had my way, they'd be thinking about it in training. We'd be training people to think about their career this way.
I love it.
That's the first thing. Okay. So the earlier you learn and practice these skills, the more career satisfaction I think you're going to have over time. The things I would do early are cultivate 1 or 2 really trusted advisors outside your work life who are willing to think contrarian with you so that you have a touchstone. 2, whether you journal or just keep mental notes or digital notes, watch for people who look like they're in charge of their life, who look like they're making decisions intentionally, and get to know them. That little hook of, would you be willing to spend 30 minutes telling me your story, will almost always get you in the door with even very senior people. So that's a second strategy. The third is make your top 10 list. And the fourth thing is, as early as you can, start reading and learning about negotiation skills. Those are my tips for early career.
Excellent. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Those in their senior level of their career, they're starting to think about kind of, when am I going to retire? And what does that mean for me? And what is my next step, or how can I retire? What are the things that you have found working with your clients are, number one, the most important ways they can think about this, but also maybe ways that most miss, things that they're not thinking about, but maybe they should be thinking about?
Okay. So the first thing I want to do is set the stage that I purposely use the term capstone rather than retirement to describe this stage of career. I do that for 2 reasons. Number one, even people who are at that place where they don't want to work for money anymore often want to keep working. The term retirement scares them, and not because they're afraid to think about this, but because they don't want to do nothing. So that's one reason I do that. The second reason I use that term is because of our Zoomer and Gen Y, Gen Z colleagues. they're going to retire from a career 3 or 4 times. They're going to say, I've done this career and I'm going to move forward. And so either whatever group you're in, you have a capstone as you come to the close of a career cycle. And I don't mean that circle we just went through, but you'll have a path or an arc through a career. It may take you 10 years if you're a serial careerist or serial entrepreneur. It may be that you do that once. If you're in my generation, I've done it probably twice, maybe 3 times as I look at this stage of my life. But I don't want us to just think you can only think about capstone if you've done something for 40 years. That's not the case. So that's my first caveat about this stage. The tips I have if you are at the capstone of a career path, again, go back to the top 10 list. Assess it against your situation and assess what you want out of your life at the next stage. It becomes really foundational to have that understanding if you're in the capstone. I would encourage you to think about what's the legacy from this career path that you want to leave and who do you want to leave it to? I would encourage you to make sure that you have a good team of advisors, a financial planner, an attorney, an accountant as you need to, so that those seemingly mundane issues around changing careers or ending a career path don't trip you up and don't surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that there are ways to be generative in different work or in things other than work. Again, this is the contrarian approach to work. We may not work for money, but many of us want to be generative, have lives of meaning and purpose. And whatever brought you to capstone, think about what brings you joy and what brings you generativity.
I love that. There's a couple of things that resonate.
Mhm.
One is meaning and purpose is what keeps humans going, what keeps us satisfied not only with our careers, but with our lives. And really knowing what brings you meaning and what brings you purpose and how to bring that into your life and how to have that is not about money. I mean, money will bring us stability and security, but there's more that brings us satisfaction and meaning and purpose. And knowing what that is when during our quote unquote work years, where we're building or creating financial stability and security, knowing how to marry that up is important. And then after that, when you don't have to worry as much about the financial security and stability at some point, if you're lucky enough to not have to worry about it because you've had this team of advisors that Sharon just talked about, and you've been, thinking about it, then it is, okay, what still brings me meaning and purpose? Or what new things will bring me meaning and purpose? And that is sort of like the building around that. The other thing that you made me realize, Sharon, is that with your definition, I have basically had 3 career capstones, and I'm on my 4th now. It's
Yes.
probably not the end. I think there's probably going to be a 5th. I was a school counselor, finished that up. That career is done. Then I was a clinical psychologist for a split second, but it really was more of a management and leadership within research operations. Usually my things take 10 years. That took exactly 10 years. I moved on to an organizational development psychologist position, and that was a good one that sort of transitioned into business owner, and that continues to build, and we'll see where that goes. But I think in each of those, it feels nice to be thinking like I retired from that and retired into something else multiple times now. So there, whatever it is I'm going to retire into next still requires the same skills about, reinvention and rethinking and what's important to me and how do I set that up?
I love that you said that. My own journey is that I retired from being a solo rural private practice family doctor to become an academic physician. And I had that career overlapping with becoming a professional coach and business owner. And I have not retired from the latter, but I have sort of retired from the other 2 bits of my career. And, I am now contemplating, I'm not really contemplating retirement. I am at a capstone and thinking about succession of my coaching work. And I think I'm going to be retiring into or succeeding into or capstoning into really focusing on my online thought leadership and presenting some of these ideas that we're talking about here as the next phase of my work. So my work life's not over and my coaching business is not over, but there's a shift coming, right? I'll also say that you said you had a 10-year cycle. If you look at my CV, it looks like I have a 3-year cycle of changing jobs. I have about a 15-year cycle of changing careers. And I just will invite people to think about, what's your cycle look like? Most of us will have one, but nobody ever talks about that, right? So
Yes, absolutely. This has been excellent. Sharon, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they go?
There are several places. One is I have a website, www.metasolutions. It's METTA solutions.com. That's the first place. We have a newsletter that people can sign up for there. We have an online community that is free, where people who want to talk about this sort of contrarian approach to work can gather. Thank you, the Bespoke Life Network. That is our spot, and happy to have you join. Again, this is free, and it's a private community that I host. So I also have a book that I've written that you alluded to. I'm not here just to promote the book, but I will offer your listeners a chance to have a discount on that book, and there will be a link in the show notes about that. And the thing I want to invite your listeners particularly to do with me if they're interested, we've crafted a tool that we call the Assessment for Career Transition Readiness. The one that we're ready to share is really geared toward this capstone thinking, but you don't have to be at capstone to answer the questions. And I will make that it's a self-assessment, and nobody gets your results but you. Essentially, I will make available to your listeners in the show notes the PDF of that assessment. You can fill it. It's a fillable PDF. You can write it yourself, save it, and work with those questions to think about what you want out of the next phase of your life, whatever that is. So it's a relatively new tool. I'm going to make it available to your listeners for free. And I would just ask if they have feedback about what works or what doesn't, I'd be happy to have that feedback, and we'll provide my email address so that they can send any thoughts they have.
Awesome. Early access, folks, for
Yes.
free before she starts selling it officially in
That's right.
exchange for some of your feedback. I mean, what could be better?
Here you
Awesome.
go.
Thank you very
Can I
much for
also
sharing
plug
that.
the workshop? Can I plug our workshop? Because
Absolutely.
that workshop will go deeper on all the things that we've talked about, and will be a 4-hour chance for people to really dive in and talk in a small group setting. So
Absolutely.
looking forward to that.
I'm really excited about that workshop. It's in late April, and we will have all the details in the show notes about it. It's on career transitions and decision making and how to be thinking about this. So deeper dive into all of the things that Sharon and I have been talking about. So folks, what did you take away from today? And importantly, what is one small change you can implement this week based on what you learned from Dr. Hull? It could be getting access to her assessment and trying it out. And that would be the one small change that you might be implementing. So share it with us on LinkedIn if you do try it so that we can cheer you on. If you enjoyed this episode, as you know, my love language is referrals, recommendations, and nice reviews. You can leave a review of the hard skills on your favorite podcast platform or my new YouTube channel at Dr. Mira Brancu. And if you're looking for more personalized support, now you know how to reach Meta Solutions, which is Dr. Hull's website and her membership, as well as if you're interested in team coaching, organizational development, you can go to gotowerscope.com to schedule a consultation with me. And together, we will navigate the complexities of leadership and career and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me and Dr. Sharon Hull today on this journey. This is Dr. Mira Brancu signing off, and until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills muscles. Take care, everybody.